Hello, Sean here at Boston Drum Center, and today we're going to listen to some different tunings of this Gretsch USA Custom 12-inch tom. We put together 10 different tunings using 3 different methods. 1, even tension on the top and the bottom head. 2, higher tension on the bottom. And 3, higher tension on the top. We used the drum dial to check our work along the way, and we found that a quarter turn of the drum key equaled about 5 units on the drum dial. So for example, if you're listening to a tuning that's 75 on the top, 80 on the bottom, it's about a quarter turn tighter on the bottom. The 10 different tunings range from 70 top and bottom all the way up to 85 on the top and 90 on the bottom. The tensions below 70 and above 85 or 90 weren't all that usable. That means that our 10 tunings span a full turn of the drum key top to bottom. And if you don't have a drum dial at home, that's okay. You can still replicate these results. Just go a quarter turn of the key at a time. We're going to start with a montage of the 10 different tunings, one hit each. So if you just want to quickly listen to these 10 different tunings and move on, you can. But after this montage, we'll listen to each tuning in a little more detail, and we'll discuss some principles and hopefully come up with some techniques that you can use to tune your own drums. So let's get started. Okay, that was the condensed version of our 10 different tunings, and now we're going to listen to the director's cut. But first, let's talk a little bit about this drum and how it's set up. As I said before, it's a Gretsch USA Custom 12-inch tom, 8 inches deep. It's got die-cast hoops. The batter head is a coated ambassador, and the resonant head is a clear ambassador. Those are both single-ply heads, 10 mil thick, and I think that's a very common choice. You should be able to achieve similar tones to the ones that we get here using single-ply heads, whether they're coated or clear, regardless of the brand. But one thing to watch out for when you're using the drum dial is if one head is thicker than the other, your readings are going to be a little bit different. I think that the drum dial reads a little bit lower on a thinner head and higher on a thicker head. Okay, now for the longer version of these 10 different tunings. This is going to take a while, so we'll split this episode into 2 different parts and conclude the first part after this more detailed listening. If you're not using headphones or good speakers already, you probably should for this next section, because we're going to be talking about some real nuances of the tone of this drum. Let's start with that first tuning, which is 70 on the top and 70 on the bottom. And this was kind of a bonus tuning. Our initial idea was to do 75, 80, and 85 on top as kind of a low, medium, high. But as we were going down to 70 for one of those tunings, we realized that on this drum, on this day, with these heads, 70 was about the minimum amount of tension, what some people call just above a wrinkle. And I know that a lot of people tune that way, so we thought that this tuning might be interesting. Here it is. Okay, so that was about your minimum tension, top and bottom, and it produced a tone that you'd expect, like a pretty long note, low in pitch. Next up, 75 top and 70 on the bottom. And again, we achieved this by coming up about a quarter turn of the drum key on top. It's worth noting that this tuning, at least to me, felt a lot better than the last one. You get a little more rebound as you come up in tension, especially on the batter head. And it's important to remember, as we're experimenting with these different tunings, your drums have to feel good to you as well as sound good. Okay, so when we went from the first tuning to the second, the pitch went up a little bit, as you'd expect. The note sounded a little bit different, and maybe you heard the lower resonant head coming through at the end of the note. Note might have been a little shorter overall. It might not have been. It was a pretty long note because the tension's pretty low. But let's come up a quarter turn on the resonant head and get back to an even tuning, 75 over 75. Okay, the even tuning sounded to me a little cleaner, a little more pure with fewer overtones. In tuning 2, I heard a little bit of flutter between the two notes, a little warble at the end of the note, and that seemed to go away here. That kind of nuance isn't anything you're going to pick up on outside of a listening environment like this one, but it's worth noting just the same. Next up is tuning number 4, 75 on top, 80 on the bottom. And 4 and 5 are kind of sister tunings, 5 being the inverse, 80 on top, 75 on the bottom. I'm going to let them run together without talking in between so you can compare them a little bit better. Okay, those two tunings were obviously very similar. The pitch was about the same. There was a different inflection. It was almost like two different pronunciations of the same word. I think you could hear the resonant head coming through at the end of the notes, and they were different in character because one was higher and one was lower. That gave a little movement to the notes, either up or down. And in tuning 5, where the resonant head was a quarter turn lower than the batter, I think we heard what we thought we heard in tuning number 2, that the note was a little shorter overall. Next up, another even tuning, 80 on top and 80 on the bottom. Okay, again, I think the even tuning got us a cleaner tone, more tone than overtone, less distortion between the two different notes. The notes are getting shorter overall as we turn the key, and that's important to keep in mind. We have to be a little more careful that the drum still sounds full and doesn't sound choked. We want it to say a lot in a short amount of time. Next up, another pair of sister tunings, 80 over 85, followed by 85 over 80. And again, I'm going to let them run together so that you can compare them. Okay, I think that was similar to our first pair of sister tunings, where in the second tuning, when we were a quarter turn lower on the bottom than on the top, there was more of a downward trajectory to the note, and it disappeared a little more quickly. Now let's move on to another even tuning, 85 over 85. And we're in bebop territory at this point. A lot of jazz players like these higher tunings because they're playing a lot of notes. It's very staccato. They don't want the notes to blend together. But again, we have to be conscious not to choke the drum, make sure that it still sounds full. Okay, there's that purity again of the even tuning, the nice clean tone, Obviously very staccato at this point, but at least to me it still sounds pretty full. Let's move on to our last tuning, 85 on top and 90 on the bottom. Frankly, 90 was kind of a stretch. It's pretty tight, but we did want to demonstrate what this does. Thank you for watching, especially if you've made it this far, having listened to 15 minutes of tom hits. We're going to conclude part 1 here, and we'll catch you in part 2.